a few years ago when she was still employed by Hills and Dales. She is now retired. Jo Phillips is a horticulturist from Meriwether County, Georgia, who retired in 2022 from Hills and Dales Estate, which is the site of the historic home and garden of the 20th century textile magnate Fuller Calloway Sr. in LaGrange, Georgia. Her career on the garden staff at Hills and Dales spanned 28 years, culminating with a promotion to horticulture manager of the 35-acre public garden in 2007. Jo earned a bachelor's degree in horticulture from the University of Georgia in 1980. Originally from Decatur County in the southwest corner of the state, she grew up on a small farm and has gardened most of her life. One of her first ornamental gardening experiences involved a small collection of modern roses given to her by a gifted hobby rose grower. While learning the care needed to keep these roses thriving and healthy, she became enthralled with gardening in general and from the beginning chose to make horticulture her career. So it all began with one rose. Post-graduation, her work experience included being on the horticultural staff of Callaway Gardens in Pine Mountain and retail nursery management in LaGrange, before being hired by Mrs. Alice Callaway for her garden staff in 1994 when Hills and Dales was still a private residence. Jo and her husband Richard, who's here tonight, have a blended family of 5 adult children and 7 grandchildren. And now they are also cat parents of 2 kittens, Pepper and Jack. Even though now retired, she is enjoying her plants and landscape at home very much, especially since she now has more time to spend on caring for them. Between family, church, volunteering, and gardening, though, every day seems to still fly by. Please welcome Jo Phillips.
Everybody, and I just fancy here.
I just drank your water.
Oh, you're fine. I've got another one right there. I got another one right there. Okay. Hopefully I don't kill you. Let me turn this on. Okay. Can everybody hear me? Okay. All right. First of all, I'm going to make a disclaimer and tell you guys that public speaking is not my comfort zone. And one reason I chose horticulture was I thought that I would never have to talk to people. I could just talk to plants. Big surprise that after I became a horticulture manager, they wanted me to represent the garden in front of people. So if y'all could have seen me in my speech class in college, you would know that I've come a long way. But still, it's not my gift. So if any of you are English teachers, don't grade me too harshly. But anyway. All right. So, gardening is such a great experience. But the older I get, when we're young, it's just the flashy blooms that seem to attract us. The biggest, the brightest, whatever. But it seems like the older we get, the more our taste, they expand. Some of the more subtleties of gardening, catch our interest. And fragrance is just one that, now, almost, I'm not as interested in a plant if it doesn't have fragrance. I'm still interested, but, fragrance is just wonderful. And maybe because my eyesight's getting worse and my hearing too, but anyway, I can still, smell. I love this quote. You always learn something when you're doing these, when you're researching these talks and everything. But Beverly Nichols was British and a man. That's not an uncommon man's name in Great Britain. They're so different. But anyway, I'm going to start this or progress this talk through the seasons. And we're going to start with winter. And I'm going to give you some fragrance ideas about each season. And this talk is by no means exhaustive. And you do have a handout, and it's not exhaustive either. It's just to kind of get your mind working about the different categories of plants and the things that fragrant plants that are available in each one of those categories. But for fragrance in winter, on the top left, that is winter sweet. Fragrant winter sweet is the common name. It's a Chimonanthus praecox. I believe it's in the same family, sweet shrub, and you can kind of see the resemblance a little bit. But it blooms in January. The only caveat is that, if we have a really hard freeze in January, which we can be apt to do, sometimes it will zap it in mid-bloom. But it doesn't hurt the plant at all. It will just, get the blooms. But it smells, it's such a clean, crisp fragrance. It's not cloying at all, and it will waft on a warm January day all over the landscape. It's very, very nice and not common. Now, it's not a huge, it's not a glorious, beautiful shrub. It's for most of the year, well, it's deciduous, but during the summertime, it's just, it's got green leaves on it, and it's kind of a tall, angular sort of plant. So it would be better in the back part of a garden, towards the back. It's not a specimen front and center. I mean, when it blooms, like I said, the scent is powerful enough to carry, so it doesn't have to have center stage. I'm not saying it's an ugly plant, it's just not a showy specimen plant, like a hydrangea is going to be in the summer or something like that. In the top right is a witch hazel, and then we have on the bottom right one of our little narcissus. And I believe that's it's in the Tazetta group. The Tazettas, I think they're group 7, but anyway, they have daffodils, narcissus grouped into different categories. But the Tazettas are usually very fragrant. There are a lot of other fragrant ones, but they're the ones that have your smaller blooms, and they're in little clusters. And the jonquil group is also very fragrant as well. We've got some more narcissus. These are campanelles on the left, and then the one on the right, the name of it is geranium, and I think it's another Tazetta. Blooms very late. Geranium is a late one that blooms in a little cluster. And the ones that I have listed, and these are all very tough. They are the type that you will see still growing in an abandoned landscape, especially the campanelles, the ones on the left. They'll just thrive with no one at home. The homeowner's long gone, and they're still thriving in the landscapes, which, those are the kind of plants that I need, because even though I have horticulturists attached to my name, a lot of my plants, they need to thrive on benign neglect sometimes. But anyway, on the left here is a magnolia. That's an early deciduous magnolia. I think this one is dark shadow. But most of the Solangiana types, the ones that are crossed, some people call them, tulip magnolias. I grew up calling them Japanese magnolias, but they are a hybrid, cross with Solangiana. And they're fragrant. Usually they're very, very fragrant. And the fragrances can vary somewhat, but they smell a little lemony to me. There's Daphne on the upper right. That's variegated winter Daphne. And these are still late winter, very early spring bloomers. And on the bottom right is a honeysuckle that's not Hall's honeysuckle, it's a bush honeysuckle. Fragrance carries with them a lot of memories. Some people say that, when I know from experience that you can catch a scent of something and it will carry you back to, your memories of that scent, to maybe your childhood, or, something that ties that scent to your memory. And the bush honeysuckle does for me. The common name, I love it, it's sweet breath of spring. And even the botanical name is Lanicera fragrantissima. And, so that specific epithet tells you that it is fragrant. Well, my memory of that is from UGA and doing a campus walk, and the professor that I had for woody plants, this was before the rock star days of Michael Durr and, whenever Alan Armitage, I was there long before that. But anyway, this was Dr. Tinga, and he would carry us over the campus. I don't know if any of you ever met Jake Tinga, but anyway, he was a remarkable man, but he just loved plants, and he was this tall, rangy, lanky man, and we walked by this honeysuckle, and it was in February, and it was blooming, and he grabbed it and stuffed it up to his nose and smelled it, and he was like, sweet breath of spring. And I thought he was just making a statement, but no, then he told us that was the actual name. And I'll never forget that moment. But anyway, and it was also when he said that botanical name, Lonicera fragrantissima. It's just one of those things I'll never forget it. But anyway, it smells so good. It's another plant that you would probably want towards the back of your planting, the back of your bed. And it has never been a rogue for me. I know that it's not a native plant, but it's not Hall's honeysuckle. That's horrible. Even though we, love the scent. But anyway, it's always stayed pretty manly in the back, but its glory is when it's blooming in, very late winter. And then it just kind of is green for the rest of the growing season and loses its leaves. So you would want it in the back. It's great to stick in an arrangement, to cut and bring inside. On the left, that was at Hills and Dales, but that is Carolina jessamine, which is a native vine. And, it can vary a little bit in scent. It truly is scented, but it's not one of those that the scent wafts a lot. You kind of have some fragrance plants they'll just permeate the air. Some you've got to actually stick your nose in to smell, but they still qualify as a fragrant plant. But I'll tell you something about Carolina jessamine. It has an evil twin that is very, very similar, and it's Gelsemium rankia. I think it's another native. It's not scented at all. It's very pretty and yellow. So there are some fragrant plants that I would recommend, usually whenever, we are learning about plants, and you're not always recommended that you buy them in bloom. Some woody or shrubby or perennial plants, it's ideal maybe to buy them in the fall and plant them then, maybe whenever of course, we always get the spring bug and we want to buy them when they're blooming. But a good many fragrant plants, it's a good idea. If you're wanting that fragrance, to maybe buy it in bloom and be able to sniff it there in the nursery before you purchase it. Because, you could be buying rankia. That's happened. And they look very, very similar. But the Gelsemium rankia won't have any scent. On the upper right are sweet peas. And of course, they're annual. The trick to growing sweet peas in Georgia is to plant them in the fall. Plant the seeds around Thanksgiving. And you just sow them. They can take all the cold we can dish out. Doesn't bother them a bit. And they'll start coming up, usually within a few weeks. But they really won't start growing until, after the first of the year, and it gets closer to bloom time, they'll really start scrambling and growing. You want to put them somewhere where they can climb. And buy the ones that see that on the label it says they're fragrant, because there again, there've been some breeding and that sort of thing with sweet peas, and there's some, types that are longer stem for cutting and that sort of thing. But your old-fashioned ones are usually the most fragrant, and so you want to, if fragrance is what you're after, that's what you want to look for on the label. And on the bottom right is Clematis armandii, which is, of course, a perennial clematis that blooms very, very early and is fragrant. Fringe tree, which mine wasn't open enough to cut and bring tonight. Mine are just opening up, but it is, a fragrant native tree. The Chinese fringe tree is fragrant as well, but, when I can plant a native, now I really do. I like native plants. Sweet shrub on the upper right, and then banana shrub on the bottom. The fringe tree and the sweet shrub are native, and the banana shrub is a magnolia. It's not native. It's an Asian plant. But if you look at it, it looks just like a little magnolia. And don't you just love botanists? Is there a botanist in the room? I don't, I say that because, they're like sometimes they love to change the names of plants. Don't you just love it? It was a magnolia. And then I came to Hills and Dales. Mrs. Calloway had it labeled. It was Magnolia fuscata, I think. Then they changed the name to Michelia, the botanist did. And it was Michelia figo. Anyway, Latin's not my strong suit either, but anyway. And then they changed it back to magnolia. So anyway, it's now a magnolia again. And I don't understand, but anyway, I digress. I'm gonna pass around some sweet shrub, and I didn't realize the room was gonna be this large. I apologize. I should have picked more of these, but anyway, y'all can kind of pass around. I've got another sweet shrub right here. And it reminds me of my son. It's my son's favorite. So that's, I sent him a picture because he's 39 now and holding. And I sent him a picture when it came into bloom, and he texted me back, my fave. So that's sweet shrub. Oh, and I've got some banana shrub too here. And hopefully, can you smell the banana?
Yeah, I do.
Can you smell it? I'll stick some back here, banana shrub. Y'all pass those around. So stick your nose in. And the banana shrub and the sweet shrub, those are both wafting fragrances. A lot of times with your fragrance oils and plants, it does come from an oil, and as the day heats up, it's when they get more powerful. And so, later in the day, you'll smell the fragrance more than you might on a crisp, cool morning. But we got home from seeing my parents. My parents are still living, and they live in North Florida. And we got home Friday evening, and the native azaleas were blooming, the sweet shrub. Oh my gosh, my whole backyard smelled. It was wonderful. It smelled wonderful. So the banana shrub, I was going to tell you about that before I move on. It is a southern classic because it's cold tender. It's tender to cold weather. The one that I have planted and the one that I would recommend for us is Skinneriana. Sometimes it's sold as a species, Magnolia Skinneriana, and sometimes it's Magnolia Figo var Skinneriana. But it is more cold tolerant than just the straight species is, or than Figo is. And I would recommend that because when we have, which we're apt to do, have mid-teens or even lower, it can injure banana shrub, but I've had no injury on the Skinneriana. And we had to replace the ones at Hills and Dales with Skinneriana too, because they got really cold damaged from some severe cold blasts that we had. A lot of northern transplants down to the south really miss lilacs. And we can grow lilacs here. They're not like they are up north of Vulgaris. It's just not quite the same down here. With more and more breeding, they're, getting some more heat tolerance. But this is a lilac on the left. It's cut leaf lilac. Now, this aroma that it has is not as powerful as Vulgaris. I'll give you that. It's not. But it is one tough cookie. It's heat tolerant. Once it's established, it's drought tolerant, and it is fragrant. It's just not as fragrant as the Syringa vulgaris, but it is a pretty thing. And it's very, very nice and very, very well suited to our climate. On the upper right is a Philadelphus mock orange, and I got a couple of funny stories about Philadelphus. One, when I was working at Garden Center, I got severely chastised because we had it labeled. We had the scientific name, and then it is Philadelphus coronarius is the fragrant one, and fragrant mock orange is the common name. And we had a woman that came into the Garden Center, and she was not happy with us, and she said that we had it labeled incorrectly, that it was not mock orange. It was English dogwood. English dogwood is another common name. And that mock orange was Pittosporum. And that's the thing with I love common names. They're so colorful and they're so charming, but they can be confusing when one region calls it calls the plant one thing and one calls it something else. And so, you can get kind of mixed up. Because, yeah, down in certain, I know down in South Georgia, North Florida, they will call Pittosporum mock orange. And I have a couple of sprigs of Pittosporum in here. I don't think it's on the list. The bloom is fragrant. It can be, my Pittosporum got really injured a couple of years ago in December when we, like the first cold blast that we had was, practically single digits. It really got injured, and my nephew that lives up in Austell, his got completely killed. So it's one of those that Pittosporum is really nice, and it's great for cutting. But you have to, you know that it may get injured if we have severe cold. Back to the Philadelphus, though. It has an evil twin as well. There's a native Philadelphus that is Philadelphus inodorus, inodorous. So inodorous means I don't smell. I have no scent. But they look just alike. And we planted some at Hills and Dales that we bought as Coronarius, and I didn't have any, and it has no scent at all. And it's gorgeous, and they got big and beautiful, and and now we hate to take them out because they're so pretty, but there's no scent. So I would recommend, if you can, if you're buying it, physically, not ordering it, but buying it in a nursery, that maybe you buy it when it's blooming and smell of it, so that you know that you're getting a fragrant mock orange and not, I would say that's the English dogwood, the non-fragrant one. Native azaleas. My natives are blooming now. The 4 inches of rain that we had over the weekend that we really needed, it didn't do my native azaleas any favors, though, the blooms. But that one is pictured as Canescens, the Piedmont azalea, and so I've got a couple of sprigs of it to pass around. Not all natives are fragrant. I'm going to pass around this one that is gorgeous, that's opening up, and I think it's one that's just it's a hybrid that just hybridized in my own backyard, and I can't detect any scent at all on it, but it's pretty. It's a pretty thing. But I just wanted to show you that, they're not all fragrant. So usually you can easily look around and see which ones are. This is another one that's fragrant. And I think that one is a natural hybrid too. This is Alabamense right here. The Alabama azalea, and it's fragrant. My grandmother called it wild honeysuckle. I don't know if any of you all grew up calling it wild honeysuckle, but that's very, very common in the South to hear it called that. It's not a honeysuckle. It does have that sweet kind of honeysuckle scent, and I guess the blooms are a little bit reminiscent maybe of honeysuckle with those long stamens or something, but that's a real common name, not unusual. But it is an azalea, which is a rhododendron. And that is one confusing genus. Whew. Don't you love them? Okay, on the left, that is, I always called it Confederate jasmine. Now I think they're calling it something else, and not Confederate jasmine. Star jasmine, that's right, star jasmine. And it has another long tongue-twisting botanical name, Trachelospermum, I think, jasminoides, which I'm not sure what Trachelospermum means, but jasminoides means I smell like a jasmine. So, that's why its common name is. It's not in the Jasminum genus. On the upper right is a honeysuckle, and it's a hybrid. Now, our native trumpet honeysuckle, the orange honeysuckle, is not usually fragrant, although you will read that it is. I don't know, maybe some lucky soul somewhere, a few of them got a hold of a fragrant native. But that one is Gold Flame. It's a hybrid, and it does have some fragrance. and has a long bloom season. And then on the bottom right is our native wisteria. Of course, the Asians are fragrant as well, but this is frutescens, Wisteria frutescens, that blooms a little later after the leaves come on, and you all are probably familiar with frutescens, but it does have a scent, and it will rebloom. And so it is a nice one, and it is not the rogue that, the Asian wisterias are. On the left is a native tree, and that's yellowwood. And it is in the legume family. It's a Fabaceae, and so you see that wisteria look, because wisteria is also legume. So you see that long white bloom. Cladrastus kentuckea, I think. I see it Kentuckia and Lutea, both species. But it is a beautiful native tree. It might take a little patience to get it to blooming size. Mrs. Calloway had one planted in the church garden at Hills and Dales, and it took a while for it to start blooming. But once it did, it does regularly. And it's another one that you would probably want to site properly, because its native range might not dip quite down this low, but it will do here. But it's another one that you would probably want to pay close attention to where you sited it, and give it a little TLC. Make sure it doesn't get too dry during hot weather. Sweet Bay magnolia on the upper right. So these are native trees, and of course the common name for Magnolia grandiflora is Bull Bay magnolia. I've never heard that in my whole life. I don't know if any of you have called it Bull Bay, but anyway, that is the accepted common name for it. We just always called it, magnolia or southern magnolia. But there are a lot of magnolias, so it needs to be distinct. Of course, it's evergreen, and it's something. Now, with breeding, there are Magnolia grandifloras that will do further and further up north. Some varieties, some cultivars will do further and further north, but it is still something. We always take for granted what we have, and I know that magnolia is a specific kind of tree that needs to be, sited right. But thankfully, there are smaller cultivars that are more suitable for smaller yards, because the species is gigantic. But there are smaller ones. But it is one of those things that we kind of take for granted, and that people from other countries, gardeners from other countries that can't grow it, people from way up north that can't grow it, they lust over it. They just love it. So we always, kind of don't appreciate what we have in our own backyard sometimes. And the roses. On the left is Pearl d'Or, and it is an heirloom, but it is also an earth kind rose. It is one that's on the list that it doesn't have to have hardly any spraying at all. It's very black spot resistant. The little buds look like they're very similar to the Sweetheart Rose. My mind just left me. Which one Sweetheart is? Cecile Bruno, there you go. Well, this one is very similar to that, but it's a little bit more apricot, peachy colored. Very similar blooms. And Alice Calloway called it her little Sweetheart Rose, even though it's not, but she loved that color. That was her favorite color. But it is a very tough rose, keeps blooming and blooming and blooming all summer.
What was the name of that one?
Pearl d'Or is French. It's Perledor. It means pearl of gold. Don't you love it? Pearl of gold. In the middle, that is, I'm probably going to butcher this French, but Zéphyrin Drune. And it's a climber. It is disease resistant. It might get some black spot, but if you don't spray it, it's not going to kill it. It's almost thornless. Doesn't have any thorns at all. And it is a little shade tolerant too. So if you don't have full sun, you can grow it. And full sun, this far south, usually, if our sun is so intense that if we can give a quote unquote full sun plant, 6 or 8 hours of our sun, that's usually sufficient. And if it gets some afternoon shade, it's saying thank you. but anyway, the zephyrine will grow in a little bit of shade. And I have another one here that two that I was going to pass around. This one is a Gallica, and I'm not sure, it's one that a coworker gave me, and it was blooming in a cemetery where some of her family was growing. We know it's a Gallica, and she's attempted to have it identified by Rosarians, and they told her they thought it was Belle de Crécy. Not sure, but anyway, it is so fragrant. And I had the first 2 blooms, I had to cut it and bring it. This is a little miniature rose that Mrs. Calloway bought, and she gave it to me whenever I was working for her. And I brought it, and I don't have a name for it, but I wanted to show you the difference when you smell that and you smell this. This is fragrant too, but such a difference in fragrance. This is much lighter, and the little Gallica will, knock your socks off. It's wonderful. The one on the right is Marshall Neal, and it is one that we had at Hills and Dales, and its fame is that, well, it's a yellow climber. It is an antique rose. When you see these pictures of old Southern gentlemen and they had a yellow rose in their lapel, this was very commonly a lapel rose, and that you could sniff. It's that close to your nose, and it nods. It's very tough, very disease resistant. I think it was named for a Frenchman. And yeah, it's pretty rare. You can find it, but it's an uncommon rose. So if you look for uncommon things, it's a nice one to have, to say, I have a Marshall Neal. Okay, so passion vine on the left, maypop. That's what I called them growing up. We called them maypops. They grew wild up and down our lane growing up. And I didn't care for the fruit. It is edible, but some of my little sisters liked it. It's really, really sweet, but it's fragrant as well. Fragrant native. And on the upper right is gardenia, which isn't native, but it's, and the common name, of course, we all know it as gardenia, but it's Cape jasmine is the common name for gardenia. And then the lilies on the bottom right, there are a lot of fragrant lilies. This is regale, lily and regale. And, it's very, very fragrant. 4 o'clocks are on the left, and 4 o'clocks are fragrant. They're another one that it can vary a bit. When they're fragrant, they're very, very fragrant. And they used to plant them a lot by outhouses, on either side of the steps. And if you're planting 4 o'clocks from seed, and they will reseed, and they'll also make a tuber, and they can be, what's the word I want to use that's nice? They're not aggressive. They can be, but if you want to be nice, they're just vigorous. They're vigorous. You want to rub out the ceilings, if you don't want too many of them. But they are fun for children. And they open late. Marvel of Peru is another common name for them, but we always call them 4 o'clocks because they open late. And as the evening progresses, they are probably moth-pollinated. A lot of times your fragrant plants that are more fragrant as the day gets on and fragrant at night, they're trying to attract those moths for pollinators. And so that's one reason they're so fragrant at night. But there are some seed companies that sell, Select Seeds is one that has a nice collection of different kinds of 4 o'clocks, and I think they have theirs labeled as to which ones are more fragrant than others. Flowering tobacco on the upper right, the Nicotiana, is very fragrant. And yes, it is related to tobacco. I wouldn't smoke it, but it is related to tobacco. And then one of Miss Alice's favorite, the old-fashioned reseeding petunias. And I love them. They are so fragrant. And they just kind of serendipitously, reseed themselves. They're not terribly aggressive, but they will come up in different spots. And she liked to leave them where they came up if at all possible, because it was just always kind of fun to see where they would appear. And they'll have all three colors. There'll be a deeper lavender and a lighter one and a white, all bloom at the same time. Really sweet. Herbs, and I saw that you had herbs in the back there, but lemon verbena, which is tender here, but it is, it's worth the effort to try to grow it. Lavender, and that one is Spanish lavender in the middle. There are some of the European, the English lavenders, some that are more in that they've done some breeding on. And I was trying to remember one that we grew at Hills and Dales that was really, really good, and I can't remember what cultivar it is. Some of you may have known. There's a lavender farm in Molina, Georgia, of all places. Have y'all been there? Yeah, She's been here? Yeah, I need to go. That is someone that's tenacious to have a lavender farm in Georgia. Really is. But, you gotta love it. Love lavender. And then patchouli, I'm a child I grew up in the 60s and teenager in the 70s. I remember patchouli, but it is one that when we would have it in our herb garden that people were like, what is that? Because they don't know it as well anymore. So I just kind of stuck it in there for fun. I was not a hippie, but, kind of knew some. But anyway, scented geraniums, which are great. And some of them will return. Some of them are perennials. They will, especially if you start them early enough in the growing season, they get a good root system established, and we don't have a hard winter, they'll come back. And the pineapple sage, which I think I saw some in the back, which blooms late as you get on into later summer, and it blooms, but of course that foliage is fragrant, all summer long. It's a little tender too. But there again, your tender plants, if you will plant them earlier in the growing season so they get a good root system established, that's the thing to do with plants that are kind of marginally hardy here or a little on the tender side, is give them a whole growing season to get established before winter time. Tuberose is on the left. It's another old-fashioned one that sometimes we forget about. And then the Hawaiian white ginger on the upper right. I can't think of it without thinking about my great-grandmother, because Avon had a scent in the 70s. It was Hawaiian white ginger. I don't know if any of you remember it. She had it in every form. She had the sachet. She had the lotion. She had the powder. She had all of it, and she loved it. And it was very strong, but it reminds me of her. Now the plant is not as intense as, now Avon's fragrance is pretty close to what it smells like, but it is much heavier. The plant itself is lighter and a little less cloying, I guess. My great-grandmother was not cloying. She was wonderful, but she loved that scent. Now I can't smell it without thinking of her. And these are Formosa lilies on the bottom right. They will reseed, but they're fragrant, and they bloom late. Very, very late and tall. And they will reseed, so if you see little lily plants coming up where you don't want them, just rogue them out early. When you can also dig them up and give them away. But Alice did love those two. They always make me think of her. She loved white plants. Not just white plants, but she was particularly fond of white blooming plants. This is Poet's Jasmine on the left. And it is just about hardy here. I would, if we have some rough, really, really cold winters, it might not make it through, but just a little bit further south, it is hardy. We always had it in containers at Hills and Dales that we could, move in and protect during the winter time. But it will bloom during the summer and bloom in flushes, and it is another name for it is French perfume jasmine. It's one of the backbones of the perfume industry in France. And it is jasminum. This one is officinale, I believe, grandiflorum. and it's wonderful. It's a wonderful plant. On the upper right is a native clematis. Alice bought, this is a paniculata, also terniflora, I think is another species of the Asian, the sweet autumn clematis, which is not our native. It was sold to Miss Alice as a native. I think I remember reading an article many decades ago saying that it was a native. It's not, but this one up here is, and they will both reseed, but this one is not as aggressive a reseeder. This is Virgensbauer, Clematis virginiana, and it is dioecious, which means, it has male and female plants, and they both bloom white. The male is slightly showier, and it will not go to seed. So, if you can obtain the male, now the seeds of the female are showy. They're the white, swirly, they're real pretty. But it will reseed, so if you don't want a reseeder, try to obtain the male plants, what I'm saying. Does that make sense? And then on the bottom is moonflower, which is wonderful, blooms at night. Children love it. Children also love fragrant plants. And I neglected to say that, like when I showed the slide of the geraniums, when we would have school children come to Hills and Dales, we have school groups come through, and for them to rub the leaves and smell, the ones that smell like citrus, the ones that, we had one that smelled like peppermint. It was real soft and velvety. Some of the others, we have some that smell like lemon rose. They are just entranced by, that scent and the mimicry and all of that. They love all the smells of the herb foliage. And it's a great way to bond, with your grandchildren. I think most of you in here, I may be skipping over some that are really, really young and maybe not grandparents yet, but it's a really great way to bond with nieces, nephews, grandparents, any children that you have in your life, to bond with them over plants and that fragrance, because they love it. And anything that's unusual, blooming at night, that sort of thing. Also, your lighter colored plants, your white plants that bloom in the afternoon later, they have a cooling effect on our landscapes. When it's so hot in the summertime, it kind of cools us down to have those lighter colors. We're, not necessarily talking about scent, and it also extends your garden into the darker hours too. So that's always something to add to your plant palette, some lighter blooming summer plants. Fall aromas, this is an osmanthus on the left, and also one on the upper right. The one on the upper right is fragrant tea olive, your fragrant olive, sweet olive, it's also called. The larger slide is another one that's the, is it angustifolia? Anyway, it's the orange one, orange tea olive. It's angustifolia, I think it is. Anyway, it blooms, the white one will bloom in flushes. It'll bloom real heavily in the fall, in October, and then it will bloom any kind of warmth that you have in the wintertime. If it's a couple of days, it'll be blooming even throughout the winter and bloom again. It'll bloom lightly on into spring. The orange tea olive is wonderful and different and unusual, but it has just that one fall bloom. And I don't know, there's something about, maybe it's just the orange color, but it also reminds me of the scent of orange Tang. Y'all remember Tang? You can still buy it, but, we were just so, we loved it. The astronauts drink it, But anyway, at Hills and Dales, we had a hedge of orange tea olive, and it was one of the first experiences with orange tea olive that I ever had, and it was a clipped hedge of it. And because it was kept clipped, a lot of the blooms were kind of on the interior, and so it's kind of a sleeper. You didn't really see it come into bloom, and you'd be walking through the garden like, what is that? And there'd be the orange tea olive blooming, and it was, even though you didn't see the very many blooms, it was still very, very fragrant. On the bottom right is an old-fashioned plant. It's loquat, and it is hardy here as well. you don't see it as much here as you do maybe in South Georgia, North Florida. It's not native, it's an Asian plant, but some people call it Japan plum because it does make a plum-like fruit with larger seeds. It blooms in the fall, so that fruit has to ripen over the winter. So if we have a really hard winter, sometimes it will zap the fruit and you won't get the fruit in the springtime. But if we have a relatively mild winter, as we're apt to do, then that fruit will be ripened in the spring, and it's really good. It tastes just like a plum, it just has larger seeds in it. But the bloom is scented. It's another one. It's one of those that you probably have to get closer to it to catch the fragrance of it. The Victorians loved it, and we put it back in the garden because we know that Mrs. Farrell, the woman that started Hills and Dales in the 1840s, she did have it in her garden. She had the loquat. She called it Japan plum. Anyway, we did put it back. But it's another unusual, it's a larger leafed, kind of like a small magnolia looking plant. Evergreen, it's evergreen. And as we get on into winter, wanted to mention foliage because you have fragrance beyond flowers. This is our native wax myrtle that's on the left. No, excuse me, that's bay on the left, the large one is bay laurel, Laurus nobilis, which if you put it in a protected spot, you can grow it here, and you can also grow it in a container as well. The wax myrtle is on the upper right, and it is one that, if you crush the foliage, you smell the scent of it. The sweet bay, of course, that's your bay leaf that you cook with, and it's also very fragrant to cut and bring in. And then a lot of your conifers. This is Juniperus virginiana, the red cedar, eastern red cedar. But a lot of your conifers that you can cut and bring the foliage in, like the Christmas tree effect, that makes your home smell so good. During the Christmas season, all those foliage plants you can bring in to scent your home. And that about wraps it up. And so I'll end with another quote. And then we have a few minutes for Q&A if you have any questions for me. I answered everything already. Yes, ma'am.
Where's the best place to find native plants?
There's a nearly native nursery that is right outside of Fayetteville.
Yeah, I've been there.
You've been there? And then the Native Plant Society, they have plant sales. They do. So they have a Facebook group that you can join, and a lot of times people that if they have extras, they'll share with you, that sort of thing too. But they do have plant sales, and they also have classes from time to time where they will educate you. And I know I've attended a couple of their classes before, and they had plants for sale after the classes as well, kind of like you all do here.
We'll have some Saturday morning.
Some native Saturday morning. Mm. Anyone else? Yes.
What was the name of the purple flower that was it was probably the most unusual looking one?
Yes, that passion flower. Passion flower, is Passiflora. I think it's on your list there. The ones that I mentioned in the slideshow, I think, are in bold print. I neglected to tell you that, but a lot of those are in bold print, unless I made a change and I forgot. But anyway, most of them are in bold print. But yes, it's native. Passiflora incarnata. Yes, that's it. There are a lot of Passifloras. Some are not native, but that one is. Anyone else have a question? Well, thank you all. I enjoyed talking with you. Did you like the plants? I hope that you were able to catch the fragrance on the ones that I sent around, that you understood what I was talking about, that they didn't make me out to be a liar. That's always what I always hate about plants, is when they make me out to be a liar.
Thank you, Jen.